From the housing estates of Maroubra to the luxury towers of Dubai, Mark Buddle rose from a rough Sydney childhood to become Australia's most wanted man. As national president of the Comanchero Motorcycle Club, he turned a biker gang into a $100 million global crime empire, fueled by cocaine, fear, and violence. But when Operation Ironside exposed his encrypted network, the empire crumbled. After 6 years on the run, Buddle's reign ended in handcuffs, caught, cornered, and facing life behind bars. From housing commission to criminal commander Mark, Douglas Buddle's story begins in 1984, in Maroubra, a rough beachside suburb of Sydney where ocean waves crashed against streets lined with public housing. Growing up, there wasn't easy. Life in the housing commission estates was about grit, not comfort. It wasn't about getting good grades. It was about learning how to survive. But Buddle wasn't the kind of kid who just wanted to make it out alive. He wanted control. He wanted power. While most around him were simply trying to get by, Buddle was already thinking about how to rise above it all by any means necessary. By his 20s, he'd already made his mark in Sydney's criminal underworld. Then, in 2010, at just 26, his name surfaced in connection with one of the city's most shocking crimes, the cold-blooded killing of security guard Gary Alabon. Alabon was ambushed during an armed robbery on Sussex Street in Sydney's CBD, shot in the back while surrendering. The 59-year-old had just 8 months left until retirement. Buddle was never charged, but he was named a person of interest, a shadow that followed him for years. Still, every hit, every setback seemed to push him higher. The rise to power in 2011, a major shift shook Australia's biker scene. Duax Dax Ngakuru, the Comanchero national president, fled to Turkey, leaving a power vacuum at the top of one of the country's most feared biker clubs. That's when Buddle made his move. Despite his age, he took the reins and became national president of the Comancheros, the outlaw motorcycle gang that even other gangs feared. Now, to understand what that means, you need to know who the Comancheros really are. They were founded in 1966 by a Scottish immigrant, William Jock Ross, and named after an old John Wayne film. But this wasn't some cowboy fan club. Ross ran it like a paramilitary unit, with drills, discipline, and a strike force made up of his most violent men. Their clubhouse walls carried a motto that told you everything about their world. If it's white, sniff it. If it's female or it moves, fuck it. If it narcs, kill it. Under Buddle, the Comancheros evolved. They weren't just bikers anymore, they were businessmen of the criminal world. The club's empire stretched beyond Australia, dealing in cocaine, firearms, and intimidation. What started as a group of men on motorcycles had become a multi-million-dollar syndicate built on fear and control. The violent years. But power in that world doesn't come without blood. Between 2010 and 2015, Buddle's name was a regular feature in police files. In October 2010, he and fellow Comanchero Mick Murray were charged after a violent street brawl in Bondi with members of the rival Notorious Motorcycle Club. Then, in December 2011, another brutal fight broke out, this time inside Melbourne's Spearmint Rhino Strip Club. Police called it exceptionally violent. Things only escalated. In 2014, Buddle was arrested for threatening to kill a Queensland police officer, a move that screamed defiance. He eventually pled guilty to a fray, causing injury and assault, serving 15 months behind bars. But here's the truth. In the outlaw world, prison isn't a punishment. It's a badge. Doing time proves you're not just talk. It earns respect. So when Buddle got out in July 2015, he didn't slow down, not even close. Within weeks, he was arrested again at Newcastle Airport, caught trying to fly to Noumea on a private jet with $60,000 in undeclared cash. His lawyers called it clean money, not drug cash, and somehow he walked away with just a suspended sentence and a good behavior bond. Looking back, that $60,000 seems almost laughable, because the money, the power, and the empire that came after made that look like pocket change. The Great Escape. By 2016, the walls were closing in. Police had reopened their investigation into the Gary Alabon murder, and Mark Buddle knew what was coming. So, instead of waiting for the knock on the door, he made a choice that would change his life forever. He ran. But unlike most fugitives who disappear into remote corners of the world, Buddle did the complete opposite. He fled to Dubai, one of the most luxurious and heavily surveilled cities on the planet, and somehow managed to blend right in. There, with his partner, Melanie Terwisha, and their 2 children, he built a new life in the shadows of skyscrapers and desert heat. Yet, running didn't mean retiring. Buddle wasn't the type to fade into silence. From his luxury base in the Middle East, he continued to run the Comanchero Motorcycle Club from thousands of miles away. He formed a leadership council made up of key figures like National Sergeant-at-Arms Tarek Zahed, Melbourne Chapter President Mick Murray, and Sydney Chapter President Alan Meehan. Together, they kept the gang's empire alive while Buddle pulled the strings from afar. Just think about that for a second. From a city half a world away, he was coordinating drug shipments from Hong Kong to Australia, negotiating with international cartels, and settling disputes between violent chapters, all through encrypted messages. It wasn't just organized crime anymore, it was organized business, a criminal enterprise that functioned like a global corporation. Only the products were cocaine, cash, and control. The perfect trap. But the very tool that made Buddle untouchable would also lead to his downfall. In 2018, the FBI and Australian Federal Police launched an undercover operation so brilliant, it felt like something straight out of a movie. They called it Operation Ironside, or internationally, Operation Trojan Shield. The idea was deceptively simple. Create a fake encrypted messaging app called Anom, market it to criminals, and let them do the rest. The phones were custom-built, no normal calls, no emails, just the app, the supposed holy grail of secrecy. It spread quickly through the underworld. Dealers, traffickers, and gang leaders across 90 countries, including Buddle and his Comanchero lieutenants, adopted it as their trusted communication line. But what they didn't know was that the entire network was controlled by law enforcement. Every message sent on Anom went straight to the FBI and AFP. For 3 years, investigators sat quietly, watching and recording everything: drug deals, hit orders, shipment routes, all unfolding in real time. Then, in June 2021, the trap was sprung. The results were staggering. More than 800 arrests worldwide. In Australia alone, 224 people were charged with over 500 offenses. Authorities seized 3.8 tons of drugs, 35 million in cash, and stopped several planned murders, including a mass shooting at a suburban cafe. Dozens of Comanchero members were among those caught. The decrypted messages laid out their global operation in stunning detail. Drug routes stretching from South America to Australia, with stops in Hong Kong, South Korea, and South Africa. And right at the center of it all was Mark Buddle, the man who thought he was untouchable, allegedly coordinating a 160-kilogram cocaine shipment into Melbourne worth nearly $40 million for years. He'd outsmarted rivals, evaded police, and run his empire from afar. But this time, the game had finally caught up with him. The long arm of the law. This is where Mark Buddle's story takes a turn that almost feels like dark comedy. Remember that poolside fight in Dubai mentioned earlier? In mid-2021, a video went viral showing Buddle brawling with a group of British tourists at a luxury resort. Someone had filmed the whole thing. Within hours, it was everywhere online. The man who had managed to live quietly in plain sight for 5 years was suddenly all over the news again. And Dubai wasn't happy about it, almost overnight. The city that once turned a blind eye to his presence decided he'd outstayed his welcome. Buddle packed up and bolted. He tried Turkey first, denied entry. Then Iraq, deported immediately. From there, he moved to Greece, then back to Turkey. Each border crossing got harder, each country less willing to take him in. Finally, in mid-2021, he found a place that seemed tailor-made for someone like him: Northern Cyprus. It was technically its own country, but recognized by only one nation: Turkey. No extradition treaty with Australia. Easy residency rules, and a government known for looking the other way. For a fugitive, it was paradise. Buddle was granted residency under a high-income category, rented a beachside apartment, and settled into what looked like a quiet, comfortable life. For a while, it seemed like he'd finally escaped the reach of Australian law, but that peace didn't last. In July 2022, Northern Cypriot authorities suddenly declared him a threat to public peace and security. Within days, armed police, some reportedly posing as FBI agents, stormed his home. Buddle was arrested at gunpoint and deported to Turkey. And here's the ultimate twist of irony. The man, who had fled to a breakaway republic, specifically to avoid extradition, ended up in the one country that could legally hand him back to Australia. Justice catches up. On August 3, 2022, Mark Buddle landed in Darwin, handcuffed and heavily guarded. After 6 years on the run, Australia's most wanted man was finally back on home soil. He didn't appear in court in person or even on video. Security fears were too high. Instead, Buddle faced the magistrate over the phone from inside a Darwin police station. The charges were serious: importing a commercial quantity of cocaine and conspiracy to import a commercial quantity of cocaine, both carrying potential life sentences. Days later, he was flown to Melbourne to face trial. In court, witnesses described him as calm, dressed in track pants, glancing around the room, nodding at the magistrate. As he left, he gave a small wave and even a thumbs up to his lawyer. Defiant to the end, he was sent to a maximum security prison in Victoria, where he remains today, awaiting trial. But even behind bars, trouble followed him. In May 2025, Buddle was charged again, this time for allegedly intimidating his ex-wife, Melanie Terwisha, during a phone call from prison. It was a reminder that his past and his temper were still very much alive. The Comanchero Empire, after Buddle. So what happened to the Comancheros after their boss was taken down? Chaos. Exactly what you'd expect when a criminal empire loses its leader. After Buddle's arrest, Alan Meehan, known as the Weasel, stepped in as national president in April 2022. But the leadership change sparked a storm. Power struggles broke out across chapters and rival factions turned on each other. In May 2022, National Sergeant-at-Arms Tariq Zahed, one of Buddle's closest allies, was shot multiple times during a gym ambush in Auburn. He miraculously survived, but his brother Omar was killed on the spot. The violence spiraled from there. Between 2021 and 2023, Sydney's underworld was engulfed in bloodshed. Public shootings, torched getaway cars, and at least 18 murders linked to gang warfare. One of the most shocking was the assassination of Alan Mouradian, a high-profile Comanchero associate, gunned down in a Bondi Junction car park while sitting in his car. Meanwhile, the gang's reach stretched far beyond Australia. In Spain, Alex Ver took over as world commander after Buddle's arrest. In Turkey, another Australian-born figure, Hakan Ayuk, assumed leadership until he too was arrested in late 2023. Turkish authorities seized 21 luxury vehicles from the gang, including Ferraris, Bentleys, and Porsches, later turning them into police cars for Istanbul's streets. In New Zealand, nearly every Comanchero member was facing charges by the end of 2024 after multiple police crackdowns. Across the Pacific Islands, especially Tonga, the gang expanded drug routes, using the islands as key transit points for cocaine and meth shipments bound for Australia and New Zealand. The empire Buddle built from exile was still standing, but it was fractured, bleeding, and running out of luck. By 2024, 3 years after Operation Ironside, 63 offenders connected to the case had been sentenced to a combined 307 years in prison. Proof that even the biggest outlaw network can't outrun the law forever. The price of power. When you step back and look at the full picture, Mark Buddle's story isn't just about crime. It's about how far someone will go for power and what it ultimately costs. Here's a man who came from nothing. No privilege, no silver spoon. He grew up in public housing and turned that grit into control, building a criminal empire worth more than $100 million. He commanded hundreds of hardened men across continents, ran international drug routes, and lived a life of luxury in Dubai, surrounded by money, influence, and fear. But beneath all that power was a man constantly on the run, a fugitive who spent years looking over his shoulder, his family scattered, his partner in Turkey, his children in Dubai, while he hid alone in northern Cyprus. He picked fights with tourists by the pool, got deported from one country after another, and watched everything he'd built slowly crumble. And for what? For an empire built on cocaine shipments that wrecked communities, fueled gang wars, and left innocent people dead. Now, Buddle sits in a Victorian maximum security prison, facing life sentences on drug charges. His trial is still dragging on, with no clear end in sight. The Comanchero Empire he once ruled with an iron fist has splintered, his closest allies at war with each other, his network collapsing, and bodies still showing up in Sydney's streets. So you have to ask, was it worth it? The bigger picture. Mark Buddle's story isn't just one man's rise and fall. It's the story of how organized crime itself has changed. The old image of bikers brawling in bars is long gone. Today's outlaw motorcycle clubs are international crime syndicates, sophisticated, structured, and brutally efficient. They operate across continents using encrypted communication, shell companies for laundering, and global drug routes that look more like corporate logistics chains than street operations. The Comancheros are a prime example, connected to Colombian cartels, Asian triads, and Middle Eastern networks. Their supply lines stretch from South America to Asia and finally into Australia, where cocaine sells for up to $370,000 a kilo. 10 times what it's worth overseas. That price gap fuels everything: the smuggling, the violence, the corruption. And the methods have evolved too. Cocaine hidden in shipping containers, fishing trawlers, even semi-submersible narco subs that can travel thousands of miles undetected. But law enforcement has evolved too. Operation Ironside changed everything. By creating the fake encrypted app, Num, authorities fooled criminals into handing them their secrets. Thousands of messages, hundreds of deals, all in real time. The operation led to 800 arrests worldwide, the seizure of tons of drugs, and the prevention of multiple planned murders. It proved that even the most paranoid criminal networks can be outsmarted. But it also showed something darker. Taking down one boss doesn't end the game. Buddle fell, another man took his place. And when that man fell, someone else stepped up. Because as long as the demand for drugs and the money remains, the cycle continues. The human cost behind the headlines, behind the million-dollar drug busts, are the real victims. Gary Alabin, the 59-year-old security guard shot in the back during a robbery, months away from retirement. His wife, Monica, who spent more than a decade waiting for answers. The 18 people murdered in Sydney's gang wars between 2021 and 2023, including bystanders who had nothing to do with the violence. And beyond the murders, there are the families broken by addiction, the children growing up without fathers because of gang shootings or prison sentences, the communities drowning in drugs Buddle helped flood into Australia. These aren't just statistics. These are real lives, real pain, real consequences. Mark Buddle built an empire on fear, loyalty, and blood. But in the end, it left nothing behind except destruction. From the streets of Sydney to the deserts of Dubai, his story is a reminder that in the world of organized crime, power never comes free. It always comes with a price. The final reckoning as of October 2025, Mark Buddle's trial is still underway in Melbourne. The case against him is stacked high. Encrypted messages that prosecutors claim show him directly coordinating a $40 million cocaine shipment. Testimonies from Operation Ironside, and years of intelligence gathered by both Australian and international law enforcement. If the jury finds him guilty, Buddle could spend the rest of his life behind bars. It's a staggering downfall for a man who once ran Australia's most feared outlaw motorcycle club from a luxury poolside in Dubai. The kid from Maroubra who once just wanted to make a name for himself actually did it, but he learned that the higher you climb in the criminal world, the more dangerous and isolating it becomes. Even now, the Comancheros haven't completely vanished. They still operate, though far weaker than in Buddle's prime. New names step up, police strike back, and the cycle continues. Power, greed, downfall, repeat. Buddle's story isn't quite over yet. His trial will stretch on for months, and more secrets about his empire are likely to surface. But one truth is already clear. The fugitive who led Australia's most feared biker gang from exile has finally run out of places to hide. People like Gary Alabin's widow, for the families who lost loved ones to gang wars, and for communities torn apart by the drugs Buddle allegedly helped bring in. It's not full justice yet, and it's not closure, but it's a start, because in the end, no matter how powerful you become, no matter how encrypted your world is, or how far you run, the law doesn't forget. And for Mark Buddle, the man once untouchable, it all came crashing down the moment he stepped off that plane in Darwin, with handcuffs locked around his wrists.